Zok the hele Gemara. No, it's so much in Benelos. Chachamim Tiknul Ham of Nois Yisrael. The Chachamim are Misakin to Benois Yisrael. The Besula Masayim, Besula gets 200 for Ksuba with Almona Mana. And Almona gets Amona. The Haim Haminu, and since the Chiyuv Ksuba in this side of the Gemara is only Midrabanan, so they had a right to believe him. Shem Amar Pesach Pesuach Matzasi Neman. If it's a Chayv Midaraisa, then he can just say Pesach Pesuach Matzasi without a riot. But since the whole din Ksuba is only Midrabanan, the Rabbanan who set up that there's such a Chiyuv also set up that if he says Pesach Pesuach, he's part of him paying the Ksuba. Fact the Gemara, Im Kain that he can just say Pesach Pesuach without any proof. What does their takana help? What does the takana help if he can, on his own, without any raya, be mafkiya that chiyuv of tshuva? If this fellow was planning to make a billable about her, he obviously doesn't like her. If he doesn't like her, then he would have not went through with the nisuin. Why would he go through all that expense and the tircha to prepare a beautiful chazna, and then after that to throw that all in the garbage because he's breaking the marriage up? So therefore, it must be that he had good intentions all along, and he married her because he wanted her. And after he did nisuin is when he found out that there's a problem. So there's such a strong raya. That's why we believe him to be mafsed her ksuba. Tana we learned. Since it's a knas chachamim, since ksuba is only a knas chachamim, therefore loisigba element hazibur is. Therefore, when she's collecting for her ksuba, and she's allowed to take even from the chasim mishugadim, meaning even from fields if there's no cash, she only gets the worst type of fields. So Zoktamar knasa, my knasa. What type of knas is it? When someone marries, he's not doing anything wrong that he deserves a knas. So how can you say the ksuba is a knas? Since the whole ksuba is a takanas chachamim, therefore therefore she only gets to collect from ziburs. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel has a different svar. He says ksuba is ishu min Torah. Unlike what we've been saying until now, that the chiyuv ksuba is midarbanan, he holds the chiyuv ksuba is midaraisa. In fact, the Gemara, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel actually say that the chiyuv ksuba is even midaraisa. What time we learned? It says by someone who's mafata, a girl. It says kesef yishkal kumoyer habesulais. He has to pay a knas of 50 shkalim, like the moyar, like the settlement of a psulois. What does that mean? So we actually learn from a Gzer Shava to Ma'anis, where it says beferish that the amount is 50 shkalim. So just like over there it's 50 shkalim, so too over here it's 50 shkalim. But the Torah refers to it as Moyer HaBasula, it's a settlement of a psula, which indicates that a psula has a certain settlement value, referring to a psula. Because some chachamim, from here the chachamim were soymech, the ksubas isha min Torah, the ksubas isha is min Torah. That's the Tanakama. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, ksubas isha ain't b'divrei Torah, ela b'divrei sefer. Ksubas isha is only b'divrei sefer. So how could you say, a moment ago we said, that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that ksuba is min Torah, where this price that we just quoted says that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds ksuba is b'divrei sefer. Look some more epoch. Let's switch it around over here. In our price, it's our Reb Shimon ben Gamliel who says ksuba isha ain't b'divrei Torah. That's the Tanakama. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was the first shita who says from Moyer Basulois, Kesef Yishkol, Moyer Basulois. From there we know that Ksuba is deraisa. In fact, the Gemara, my chazos the Abchas Pasraisa. How do you know that you're supposed to switch around the second brisa and to say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds Kesubos deraisa, Eivach Kamaisa. Let's switch around the first machlokes, and let's say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel there says it's only midrabanan. Zok Gemara, because Hashma'ina later Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, we already know from a different place that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds Domar Kesubos Isha midaraisa. We already know from elsewhere that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that Kesubos Isha is deraisa. It's not we learned. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Noisin La Mimoyis Kaput Kayo. And Rashi tells us that the money of Kaput Kayo was more valuable than the money of Eretz Yisrael. And if someone married in Eretz Yisrael, and there it's in Eretz Yisrael where he was Meshabed himself, the Mana of the Messiah, and then he got divorced in Eretz Yisrael, well then he only has to give the value of the money of his commitment to Eretz Yisrael, even if he got divorced in Kaput Kaya. It doesn't make any difference if he got divorced in Eretz Yisrael or if he got divorced in Kaput Kaya. Either way, the Moyes Ksuba is based on when he was Mechayiv himself and he wrote the Ksuba. And at that point he was in Eretz Yisrael. However, the Brisa goes weiter and says that what if he got married in Kaput Kaya and then he got divorced in Eretz Yisrael? The Brisa says over there that you only have to give the Moish Eretz Yisrael. His shibud was in Kaput Kaya, which was money that was more valuable. So it's kind of holds that's only midrabanan. Since Ksub is only midrabanan, they could say that your chiyuv to pay is only based on the time of the get, because they can make the rules. But if there's a shibud midaraisa b'shashter ksuba, shashter nesuin to be mechayim with the ksuba, well then there's a proper chiyuv of mois Kaput Kaya. So then if he got married in Kaput Kaya and got divorced in Eretz Yisrael, he should still have to give the more valuable money of Kaput Kaya, because it's a shibud midaraisa. So that's how we know that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the shibud of Kesubos deraisa, because he held that if the marriage took place in Kaput Kaya and the get took place in Eretz Yisrael, the money is of Kaput Kaya. Or you could say a different story, that it's not a kasha at all from the second brisa that we quoted, which seems to say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that Kesubos is only derbanan. Rather cooler, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, even what we quoted as the Tanakama, which says from Kesubos, we know the Kesubos deraisa, that's also part of what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is saying. The Chesur Mechzer, it's missing a part of the brisa to bring it all together as one shita. From Kesubos we learned that Kesubos Isha is minat Torah, but Kesubos Almana eina midivrei Torah elo midivrei Sofer. But the Kesuba of an Almana, that's not midivrei Torah, that's only midivrei Sofer. Say Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Kesubos Almana eina midivrei Torah elo midivrei Sofer. So the second half, which we have quoted as Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's member, is just the end of his member where he talks about the Kesuba of the Almana. But the Kesuba of a Basula, Avada is midaraisa. Who does look at Reb Nachman? Someone came and tied it to Reb Nachman as follows: Amule Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. So the Gemara now is going to bring different cases of a chasm says Pesach Pasuach and how the Rabbanim handled the case. So this chasm comes along and says Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. Amule Reb Nachman said, "You're a bacher, you never married before, and you somehow know exactly how a bia should work and what's the feeling of a Pesach Sasam and what's the feeling of a Pesach Pesuach, that means you must have been sleeping with Zaynis. So Azavu Kufri, you should whip him with branches or leaves from a dekel, from a date tree, which has thorns on it, so that when you whip him, it'll hurt him. Why? Because he's exposed himself, he's revealed himself as someone who's sleeping with Zaynis. He obviously has been boiled a lot of Zaynis, so he deserves patch for that. But Avada he's believed because he said Pesach Pasuach. Correct the Gemara. How could Reb Nachman give him Malchus for Reb Nachman who the Amar Mehemet? Reb Nachman said that he's never meant to say Pesach Pasuach and pater him from the Tshuva. Zok Gemara Mehemet. Yes, we never said he's not believed, but who must feel Kufri. But he gets patched because he revealed to us clearly that he must be very familiar with Bia. Rabbi Choy Mashani, Rabbi Choy answered, Kan bebacher, kan benasi. When do we believe somebody when he's married and he's been married before and he knows how Bia feels? So then he can determine that it's Pesach B'Suach. But someone who's Taka Bacher, we don't believe it. So why do we give him Malchus? Not because we think he's Roy Zonius. It's just a tiny, were you Roy Zonius about you weren't? Elamai, you have no idea. So therefore you're getting Malchus with Kufri. Why? Because you had a chutzpah to try to shame and to falsely accuse a woman of Pesach B'Suach when you have no idea. Someone once came in front of Rabbi Gamliel. Amalei told him, Pesach B'Suach Matzos. So how did Rabbi Gamliel deal with it? Amalei, Shema Hitisa. How do you know that you went in straight? Maybe you went in on an angle, and therefore you went around the B'Sulam, you didn't feel it. And I'll show you such a concept. I'm going to tell you an example. A person was walking through a doorway in the darkness. Now, you know, if a door is partially open, if you walk straight through it at a 90-degree angle perpendicular to the wall, you're going to bang into the door because it's not fully open. But if you're walking in at an angle, then you might slip right through the opening where the door is partially open. So there you find Hita Matzai Pesach. If you go at an angle, you'll find it wide open. But late, if you want to go straight through perpendicular, not to know. So since you're not super sure exactly how the beer worked, maybe you were boiled in such a way where it seemed like it was Pesuach, but it was really no. Army, there are those who learned that Rabbi Gamliel was more accusatory towards him. And he said that by mistake this couldn't have happened. It must be that you purposely were boiled in such a way, and you for sure were breaking her Basulam, and you're just denying it. Hachi Omar Lei, this is what Rabbi Gamliel said. Shema b'mezid tisa v'karta l'dasha v'avra. Maybe you b'davka, you were b'mezid, you were mata, and you actually did break the Basulam, and you opened up the door. And I'll give you a mashal. If he purposely goes in at a special angle, no, but the time here is, Rashi says, that you did break the Basulam. And the Kach Balka is Shema b'mezid itisa. Maybe you did b'mezid, v'kart l'dasha v'avra, maybe you actually did break your Basulam and you're lying. I was boiled her. So this is already not Pesach Basuach. This is Tain's dam, which he's sure he didn't see dam, and there could even be Shishbinin to verify that. Amr Eloi. So she said, Rabbi Basula, you see, I'm telling you, I was a Basula when we went in, and he was boiling me. He took my Basula. There was no dam. I don't know what to tell you, but I know that I was a Basula. Amr Lahem. So Rabbi Gamliel said, I want to see their sheet. The sheet that they used the night of the first beer, I want that sheet. They brought that sheet. And he soaked it in water to wash it off. And it was washed. It turned out that the Shechva Zera that came out of him stained the sheet and covered over those blood stains. And that's why they didn't see the blood stains on the sheet. But once he washed off the Shechva Zera, it uncovered the dam that was being concealed by the Shechva Zera. And in fact, he showed them, look, there was dam. He told him, he told the husband, go be zoich in your mekach. In other words, enjoy your new wife that you have, because your marriage is good and there's no issue here, because in fact it was dam, you just didn't notice it. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Zakai, told Rav Ashi, should we not do that as well? We should regularly do that test whenever there's a complaint of loy matzasi dam. Amalei told him, for us it wouldn't work. Why? Because our laundry process doesn't do such a good job of removing even the zera. Giyut shalanu, even our full pressing, which is the final stage of washing, is only kakibus shalahem. And Rashi says, why? Rashi says, so you may mayim yofin l'chabesh. They had very, very good water, so it cleansed well. Or maybe they had very good detergent, l'chabesh. But with our mere washing, in our washing, it's not enough just to wash. It actually has to be pressed, and they used to bang it with smooth rocks. But without banging it with smooth rocks, just washing it, it wouldn't do as good a job as when they used to wash it, and therefore it wouldn't take away the zera. The armored navet giyutz, and if you want to say you should do the giyutz process was banging it with rocks. I'm not sure exactly how that worked, but if you do that, then ma'avrle chumrasa. That would then take away the dam as well, and if that happens, then you don't see dam anyway. So our process, the regular washing process, doesn't take away the zera, and then when you finalize the process with giyutz, it'll not only remove the zera, it'll also remove the dam. Therefore, this solution doesn't work for us. Their keepers will take away the zera, not the dam. That's a process that would work for us, but we don't have that process anymore. Who also the Kamei Rabbi Gamliel by Rabbi. Amr he told him, Rabbi Ba'alti B'lei Matzasi Dam. The same time. Amr so the Kala said, what do you mean Matzasi Dam? He wasn't eating Bala. He wasn't boiled. He's a liar. Amr Rabbi Adayin B'sulani. She said, I'm still a B'sula. So now they need to test if she had B'sula or not. How in the world could you possibly know if a woman was a B'sula? Amr Lahem, he told him, he really stay shvachas. Bring me two shvachas, two women that are shvachas. Achas B'ula, Ba'achas B'sula. One should be a B'sula, one should be a B'ula. And I want to show you, I want to demonstrate to you, test. He brought these two women to him. And he sat them both with their legs spread apart on top of an open barrel of wine. Not that they were exposed, their bodies were covered, but they were sitting on top of the barrel of wine with their legs open. Bu'ula, the one that was Bu'ula, which means she was already open there at the bottom, the smell of wine would go up into her body and come out of her mouth, and she would have a breath of wine. Besula, but the Besula was closed, ein reichanoid. So once they did that test and they demonstrated with the Shivcha, then they said, now let's try it with this girl. So that proved that she was still a Basula. So he told him, Lech zakeh b'mekach, go be zoiche in your wife. She's a Basula. Practically, Gemara, why did they need to do the thing with the Shvachais? Why didn't they just test this woman? Why do they have to do the pre-test with the Shvachas? So Gemara, because Gemara have a shmiyale. He actually heard that there is such a test. But Ma'aseh have a chassid. He never saw the YouTube video of it being performed. He just knew there is such a test, but never saw it being performed. And he wasn't sure if he would do the test properly and if it would be a right. So Shapir, maybe he doesn't know how to do it. And what would that do? That would lead to being mizalzel in B'nai Yisrael. It's not respectful to put a B'nai Yisrael through such a test if the test is not a good test. So first he did a test to prove that he knows how to do it. He had an opportunity to test the test itself, to see that it works. And then he put this Jewish girl through a somewhat uncomfortable experience because we knew at that point for sure that it would work. Who does Allah Kameid Rabbi Gamliel Asaki? Amr Loi told him, Rabbi Ba'alti V'loi Matzasi Dam. Amr Loi, so she said, I was a Basula, but there was no Dam Basula. Rabbi, you know why? Mishpachas Dorkati. I am from the Dorkati family. She'ein Lahen, they don't have Loi Dam Nida or Loi Dam Basula. We're perfectly fine, but we don't have Dam Nida or Dam Basula. So the fact that there was no Dam is not a right. Gamliel checked around in their family to see if there's actually such a thing. He found out that she was not lying. In fact, that's exactly what happened. So he told him, go be zoich in your wife, because the fact that she doesn't have dam doesn't prove it any issue. Ashrecha shezachisa the mishpachas darkati. Fortunate are you that you were zoicha to this wonderful mishpach. My darkati. What is a darkati? Darkatua. To the trikun, it's the two words combined that the doors are cut off with a mishpacha who doesn't see dam. So it sort of indicates that they didn't have children. Darkatua, they didn't have children. So their doors are cut off. So Amr Reb Chanina said, when Reb Gamliel told him, Lech Zakei b'mecha, go be zocheh, this wonderful wife that you had, Tadchunim shall hevel, nichbu Reb Gamliel It was a Tadchunim shall hevel. Because what do you mean go be zocheh in your wife? It's a big detriment to you. It's not a schus, it's a chayv for you. Because now you have a wife who cannot have children. So it's very important to note that it didn't mean she couldn't have children. It means a woman who doesn't have dam will have a harder time conceiving, won't have as many children, but avada she could have children. The Tana Mishum Rabbeir called Isha should have a woman who has a lot of dam, but she's a very fertile woman. So this woman was not very fertile, but avada she was able to have children. Itmar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Omar, Zakei b'mekach, go be zoiche in your mekach, which is a good thing, indicating it's a good mekach. Omar lei is what Rabbi Gamliel told. Rabbi Yosy bar Abba Omar nischai b'mekach Omar lei. He said, too bad, this is what you're stuck with, but this is your right. So for Bishop if you say nischayim, it makes sense. Hanid Rabbi Chanina, that would explain Rabbi Chanina, who said that in fact it was not a good thing. She's not a fertile woman. The Mandam is Zakei. The Mandam who says that Gamliel told the Zakei, what's that? What does that mean, Zakei? It's not a good thing. My Zachusa. That's why the Schusa, the Hostel, they suffer Nida. Since she doesn't see Dam, you'll never have a problem that she's a suffer Nida, because she doesn't have Dam. She doesn't have Dam Nida. Therefore, that's a Maila. There's a story with a Moshe. Here you have a woman who is not fertile, but she could have children, she just won't have a lot. So there was a girl, who never saw Damida. Her doctors told her that it's possible when she gets married, she'll have children. And everything will go back to normal. So the question to Rav Moshe was, do they have to tell a prospective shidduch, a boy who wants to get engaged to her, that she has this issue? Rav Moshe asked 100% not. So Mar Gemara, you see, you don't have to. Because it's possible that even if a woman does not have Damida, she could still have children. But if in fact you knew a woman couldn't have children and you didn't inform the chassan, then it's a mekach. Who does look at made Rabbi? Amallah, he told him, Rabbi, the same argument. I didn't see that. Omer Eloi, she told Rabbi, Adain Besula, I was still a Besula. But Ushnei Betzuris Hava, that year was a year of hunger, people were malnourished. Rabbi saw Shepneim Shachurim, their faces were dark from hunger, and he was choshed that maybe that's why there was no doubt. He said, let's freshen these people up. First, let them bathe. And they should have to eat. And they gave them to drink. And then he said, why don't you try again? So it turned out that once they were nourished, she had Omerloi, he told the chassan, go be zoich in your wonderful wife. Kari Rabbi Alim. Rabbi said regarding to this couple who didn't see dam, Safad Arim al Atzma, their skin was hanging on their bones. Yavish Hayakeh, they were dry like dried wood. That's referring to a person who doesn't have any moisture or liquid in the system because he's in a situation of a hunger. That will stop the dam besul. Zok Tahelig Mishnah. Besula Ksubasa Masayim. The ksuba of a besula is Masayim. The almana is only a month, half of that. What happens if someone is a basula and she's an almana? For instance, she was only nisaris yet kedushin, and then her husband died, so she never had bia. So she's a basula and she's an almana. Or a grusha, she was a basula and her husband divorced. Or chalutza, her husband died, and then she had to get chalitza from her husband's brother. But in either case, there was no bia. If it's mina erison, if there was no Nesuin, there was only Erusin, then we say Kesubos on Messiah. They're still considered like a Basula, and their Kesubos still Messiah. But since it's expected that they're Basulas, if their husband says Pasach Basula or Latasi Dam, that Tanya would be applicable, because it's expected that they're Basulas. Zok the Heilige Gemara. My Almana. Where does the word Almana come from? Reb Chana Bagdasah, Almana al Sheimana. She's an Almana because what does she get? What does she get when her husband dies? Not a Messiah, she gets Elamona. She only gets Almana. I wonder if that's where the word Alimony comes from. But Almana means she's only getting Almana. Zok the Gemara, but that's not true because not all Almonas get Almana. There are Almonas who get Messiah, like we just learned in our Mishnah. Almana min Eirsin like Lemema. What are you going to say about an Almana min Eirsin who actually gets Messiah? Zok the Gemara, Adi the Hakar Almana. Once we refer to a woman who has Bia, which is the normal Almana, who is living with her husband, and then her husband died. That's where the word Almana comes from, and she only gets Almana. Once we identify a woman who loses her husband as an Almana, Hanami Kari La Almana. So we call any woman who loses her husband Almana, even though she gets more than Almana. So to Gemara, how could that be? If the whole halacha of Kesubos Derabanan, which Derabanan established, which means when the Torah was written, when the Torah was given, there was no such concept of an Almana getting any type of money. So Almana, the Ksiva B'Yaraisa, Ma'ikal. How does that explain the word Almana in the Torah? So the Gemara das Hidin Rabbana and the Misak Almana. The Torah knew that eventually the Rabbana are going to be Misak and Almana for Kesubah, and the Torah knowing what's going to be in the future, the Torah was Misak and Almana. The Torah knew that the Rabbana would be Misak and Almana and called her an Almana now. Try to Gemara, because of prayer loss, you find psukim that are talking about things in the future. Of course we do. When it discusses the Nar around Gan Eden, it says V'Shem HaNar Hashlishi. The third Nar was Chidekel. And how does the Torah explain the word Chidekel? Hu HaHoylech Kidmas Asher. That goes to the south of Asher. The Tanner Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Yosef said, Asher is Uslika. Asher is Slika. So this place Asher, that's referring to a specific city, and the Torah mentions it. B'shas when the Torah was written, b'shas sheish shemei bereshis, which is just when the Torah was talking about b'shas sheish shemei bereshis, there was no city at that point. Miavoy was the city of Slita there by sheish shemei bereshis? Of course not. The city was developed later on. El Dasida. There was a city. Eventually, this place was Slita. So Chanami Dasida. So you see, the Torah referred to something or a place, even though at the time that place didn't exist. But the Torah is referring to the Al-Shem. In the future, there'll be such a place there. So too, the word Almana is used because in the future, she'll get Almana. Motor. Let's analyze the different features, the different benefits of Motor. This has nothing to do with our sugya, but since we quoted the one halacha from Reb Chana Bagdasah, everybody knows if you go and buy on Amazon, you go buy a product, and then they'll say other items from the same seller. So now that we had a need to bring Reb Chana Bagdasah down, the Gemara is saying, let's show you other items in Reb Chana Bagdasah's store that he has to share. Motor, what are the features of rain? Mashka, it irrigates the karka. Marav, it saturates it with moisture, with rain. Umazabel, it fertilizes. How does rain fertilize? Because it softens up the earth and allows nutrients to get absorbed into the earth. Uma'adein, Rashi, it creates a luster. Umamshich, and it pulls pears out and makes it that pears should grow from the earth. So these are the different features that Motor has. Amar Rabba by Rabbi Shmuel, Vitame Rabbi Yemer by Shlamya, Micro, where do you see a pasuk to support these four items, these four features that rain does? It says Talamel Rave, its rose will be Rave. Rave is referring to rain making it wet and saturating it, which supports the two things, the two first items that Reb Chana Bagdasah said, Mashke and Rave. Then it says Nachas Gedudeha, it flattens the bumps. Berevivin Timagegna, and that's referring to, it makes it into fertilizer, and then simcha tevarech, and therefore the pairs that will come out of it will be the bench, which is referring to the mamshech. Rashi says, just to clarify the Tima Gegna, Rashi says, Rabbi Nachas B'Zeh, Kasher Brim Tzvagega, Rabbi Mashka Marava, Tima Gegna is softening up the earth, Hare Mizabel, that's Mizabel, and Ma'adin, Mamshech is a pairs, Naftu, where do we know that from? It's Simchatavar. The Zoktimar Bacter, Amar Belozer, Mizbeach. What are the features of what a Mizbeach does? Miziach, it pushes things away, like the Peronius, but that's what the Gemara says, Lamaskoda. But first, the Gemara is going to assume it means it pushes away Averis. Umazin, Umazin, and it feeds us, because in the schos of the carbonates that are brought in the Mizbeach, Klal Yisrael Asparnasa, Mechaber makes us loved by the Rebbeinu Shalom, and Mechaber cleanses our Averis. Zoktimar, Hainu Mechaber, Hainu Miziach. So normally when you have such a lashon, the Gemara is asking, isn't it the same thing? But that's not what the Gemara is asking here. Here Rashi says, Hainu means Hainu. Hainu Mechaber, in what way is the Mizbeach Mechaber? Hainu Miziach, in what way is the Mizbeach pushing away things? So the Gemara, Miziach Xeris. In which way is it Miziach? By pushing away Xeris. So if someone does not Avera, it's a Xera, the Mizbeach is making from the Xera. But that doesn't mean the Avera is gone. The second item is a Mechaber is upon yours. It also cleans away the Averis. Tamri, some of the features of eating dates. Mishachnon, it makes you, Rashi says, Mishachnon means Mechamamos, it warms you up. Misavon, it satisfies you, it fills you up. Mishalshalom, it acts as a laxative, which is also healthy, and therefore Ma'ashran, it makes you feel strong, because after someone's able to relieve themselves, they feel strong and better. Even though dates are sweet, they're not addictively sweet, like a jelly bean that you eat more and more, or like Lay's potato chips where it says on the package, you cannot only eat one. A date, you can eat one and you don't have to eat more. It doesn't have that addictive nature. Amar Rav said, tomorrow, if someone eats dates, his mind becomes a little unclear, like intoxicated almost, and he's not allowed to fast. Which is mashma that tomorrow aren't so good for you. Frank tomorrow makes faith. Tomorrow shachos varabis yafas. If you eat tomorrow at a time which is after your meal, it'll be good for you. So shachos means after you've eaten past shachos. Navish means way after you ate your afternoon meal. The mincha rice, if you eat them by mincha, which is after your afternoon nap, but before you've eaten your large suda, then they're bad for you. But tzarayim, if you eat it in the afternoon, which is right after the afternoon meal, then it's the best. In commotion, they're the best. Why? Because even though you need to go to the washroom, if you eat them at night, going to the washroom middle of the night is not kishmak. It's out in the field. But in the afternoon, where it's still light, there it's kishmak, because then you can go and relieve yourself right away in the washroom. And eating dates are mavatl, three bad things. Machshavara. If you're depressed, if you're sad, if you're nervous, if you're worried, it acts as an agent that calms you down. It takes away your daga. It stops you from worrying. So it has a positive mental effect in calming your mind, which of course will help you think clearly. And it also is mavatl choylem ayin, because it's mishalshal, so it helps your stomach clear itself out. And since it's mishalshal, it also prevents hemorrhoids. So if you see it's so good for you, how could you say that if you eat dates, you're not allowed to fast? We're not saying that it's not good for you. Avada dates are good for you. However, yet right when you eat it, it does cause a little bit of an intoxication, and therefore you can't think clearly, so you can't fast it. And you find something else that does the same. Just like good wine. But if other wine is good, or you could say another chim. When do you say you shouldn't eat dates? That's if you ate the dates before your meal, before your fast. Well, where do we say that it's very healthy to eat dates? That's after you ate bread. Abaye said, I'm really angry. My mother told me, and we know Abaye Rachmano's son didn't have a mother, so he had someone who brought him up, and he referred to her as Aim. He said, Tamri Makami Nahama, if you eat dates before bread, Kinagalu the Kula. It's like taking a chainsaw to a title bomb, to a palm tree, to a date bomb. That's how destructive it is. But Bazu Nahama, if you first ate bread and only afterwards you ate tomorrow, then it's Ki Abra Ludasha. It's like a bolt on the door, which strengthens the door. Like a deadbolt on the door, which strengthens the door. It's a good thing. Now the Gemara says, let's analyze what certain words mean and where their word comes from. Dasha refers to a door. Why does the word dasha mean a door? Amarava, because it's an attribute of derech sham. You go through this way. Even though dasha is an Aramaic word, and derech sham is a Lashon HaKodesh word, different languages influence each other. Darga, which means a ladder. Amarava, where does that come from? Derech Gag, it's the way up to the attic. Purya, which we know is a bed. Amar Papa, why is it called Purya? The purpose of the bed is to do Puravu. Amar Nachma Yitzchak. Nachma Yitzchak said, now that we're talking about where different words come from, let me tell you where the word islandness comes from. Afanu Naimar, islandness is a woman who can't have children. We call her Aduchronis, which is a ram. A ram is a male animal, the Loyolda. I hope I don't get thrown off of YouTube for saying this, but a male can't give birth. A male can't give birth. The only thing is a male birthing person. So we refer to a woman who can't have children as an ayol, as a ram, because she cannot have children. Okay, we will stop here, and we will mamshech in about 15-20 minutes. We'll be mamshech with Daf Yud Aleph. Shkoyach.